So it has this affective response on us all of how we actually feel about it, particularly as change fatigue academics and professional staff when we've just been through COVID and now we're hit with this unknown of what we're going to do about generative AI. And as we've gone along a little bit further, some people are getting quite confident. You know, that we've heard in the what's working sessions this week and other times, people have done some fantastic things at UQ with introducing students to using this tool. But there's still a lot of us that are unsure and some of us who are confused. And now I think about halfway through the year, which I call the year of discovery, some people are very dedicated, enthusiastic, but there's others that really would like to know it would go away, which unfortunately it's not going to. So next slide, please. So where does that really leave us? Oh, this is just another slide I popped in. You've probably seen Dom talk about it, Dom McGrath, but I put it in there because you'll get a copy of these slides. And it's a very useful checklist about the ethical considerations of whether you, in your practice, or whether students should actually use, when it's appropriate to use and when it's not appropriate to use, the Gen AI tool. So that's a nice little checklist. But I will just go to the next slide, which is, where are we? What do we know so far? Well, I think we need to be able to be settled to say it's troublesome knowledge. So what Gen AI can do and the challenges, both sides, it is a space of liminality. So in my professional background, that means we're in a confused state. We don't have one single answer. Wouldn't it be lovely if someone could just say, do this or do that? But it's not going to be like that. It's going to be much more complex. So because of my experience in academic integrity around contract cheating and other things that happened, I am confident that the responses will become clear over time. And definitely in the last 6 months, we have seen a lot of progress around how, ways to use it, the troublesome parts of it, etc. And as we've said from the beginning, it takes all of us to work collaboratively on that. So we can share things we've learned, the school sector's in the same position, vocational, the government's still working out things. But we also want to hear from you as integrity officers how this is working out in your practice. Thank you. This is just a reminder, you probably already know, this is the scope of our academic integrity challenges. The two in orange, good and bad. So the two in orange, there actually are some good parts perhaps, or some things that aren't around misconduct in them. We want students to be able to use Gen AI because it's a work skill. It'll be something that'll help them in professional practice. So the two in orange, we're sort of juggling part misconduct, but part, we want students, students can use them. So for file sharing, they can use them for study. Very different to contract cheating, which is particularly, I'm buying an assignment. There's nothing good about that for learning, for students learning. So anecdotally, people have been saying, oh, this must be really good that contract cheating is now going to go down as a practice because it's easier and less expensive if students just go straight to the chat and ask it to do their assignment for them. And that is true. And if you go to the next slide, well, we'll see, for example, Chegg. Chegg has actually, their shares have dropped a lot. And, oh, sorry, forgot to mention, go back. The other big thing in UQ at the moment is the medical certification falsification. So this is another problem. It doesn't really connect, but I'm just mentioning it there. And you may have been one of those people that has actually, experienced this. But the university overall is having another sort of round of this fraud, I guess, which is misconduct, but also academic misconduct because the students are getting advantage. So just a little reminder about that. Now we'll go to Chegg. So what is happening? Well, it is true the shares went down a lot and they were getting a bit worried, but you've got to remember this is corporate, it's big business. So they've come up with a new strategy, which is called Cheggmate. So what they've done there is use their vast repository of what everyone's given them, of all that information, and they've combined it with ChatGPT-4. And so now you're going to have it says they're faster, personalized, adaptive, accurate, supposedly effective and helpful. So they're now trying to get back some of the clients that they've lost and to attract new ones by joining in what the Gen AI trend is. The other diagram there I have shown before in certain parts of UQ, but it's from Ted Pickering from QUT. And if you're familiar, he has the assignment watch software that checks where your material is going across the internet. He's been tracking CHEG questions, and he says over the past 5 years, so you can see the different colours there. Obviously, we had a peak in COVID with it. But if you look at 23, which is the light blue colour here, you will see up till April when he did that, we're still quite high up. There is no drop down in the number of questions that people are asking to get from CHEG. So we would have to assume, being corporate and the students perhaps stress of what's happening in different ways, that CHEG is still alive and well. So not swapping one thing for the other, but we've now got a couple of an extra thing to think about. Thank you. And I think that might be the end of my slides, but if you could just flick. Yes. So now I'd like to introduce you to Peter. Peter Rutherford is a learning designer in Italy who has done quite a few years now, Peter, haven't we, of resource development for academic integrity across our community. So thanks, Peter.
Good, thank you, Christine. As Christine said, I'm just going to spend a few minutes this afternoon just bringing you up to date with some of the latest resources that are available for both you and your colleagues. The first one, if you go to the Italy homepage, you can see that there's a teaching assessment update. Of particular interest to you should be the generative AI and teaching and assessment for UQ that I've circled there, but there is other content that would be of interest to both you and your colleagues as well. That's accessible from the very front page of Italy's site. Next one, please, Juan. And just going along with the generative AI, because it's a major focus this semester, of course, there's additional resources that have recently been developed and placed up on the Italy site, teaching, learning and assessment with generative AI. That should be of major interest to you. We recommend to you and your colleagues that they have a look at it. There's the assessment and Gen AI pages. Another one that might be of interest is testing or assessment. So you can put in a piece of assessment and see how AI-proof that current assessment task is, which might encourage people to see if they can improve their assessment and make it more Gen AI-proof. Some other resources that lecturers might like to recommend to their students are in the library's new Digital Essentials. They've got a complete Gen AI section that they've added to it. And there's also a resource on referencing if the courses and the course coordinators permitted students to use the Gen AI. Next one, please, Home. For those of you who are new to the role this semester, you might like to go back and look at the resource that was produced early last semester when we were new to Gen AI, and it was around misconduct guidance, giving a bit of a rundown on the Turnitin tool that can be used to find out whether any Gen AI use has been detected. It also gives a bit of an explanation on how to interpret the Turnitin generative AI score that might appear, and also as integrity officers, how you might make a case. Now, part of the focus was we didn't want everybody to get overburdened by cases of possible misconduct. So we've got some recommendations there on how you might deal with course coordinators who identify a score from the indicator tool and are concerned that there might have been some misconduct occurring. So that's available on both the website and the Integrity Officers Community of Practice Blackboard site. Next one, please, Hong. Just a quick update on our integrity modules that we've got. The one for students, AIM, has now had 66,000 students completed, roughly 66,000. There's another 15,000 who were required to complete it last semester. There are a couple of thousand that hadn't completed it in time, and so they had their service suspended for a period of time and given another chance to complete it so that their grades could be unlocked and so that they'd be able to re-enroll for the semester. The other one I want to mention was the staff academic integrity modules. You may be aware that they are updated last year, and they've been further contextualized in UQ. And recently they've been added to Workday. So any of your colleagues that go in and do the staff academic integrity modules could now have their work recognised in Workday. The other thing I just wanted to remind you about briefly was the remedial academic integrity modules. They're now available and they have been for some time. They're probably more suitable for students who have unintentional or minor transgressions, and they're a duplicate of the integrity modules for students, and they are tracked and scored, so you can be sure, rest assured that if your students are asked to do them, that you'll be able to follow up to make sure that they have actually completed them. The other thing I just wanted to quickly mention, I don't know if there's a slide there or not, was don't forget the integrity officers, community practice is a great place to go to for resources, and Italy site as well. That's probably it for me, and I'm going to pass it on now to Ayal Siddiqui, who's the manager of the e-learning support team, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about authorship.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Just a reminder, the contract cheating evidence gathering and report preparation workshop, we standardly run that about week 5 and send invitations out week 2. And that's really aimed at making sure that all the new academic integrity officers are aware of authorship and the evidence gathering and report preparation steps. We didn't run it first semester this year, but we do still have a recording from second semester last year, which will be on the site that Peter mentioned, the Academic Integrity Officers Blackboard community site. We are looking to update this workshop to cover AI and as well. So we'd really appreciate what you think, any advice you have about updating this workshop, what's relevant about contract cheating, in the current environment with AI as well. So we'd appreciate that. If you put that in the chat or email me afterwards, that would be great. And if we go to the next slide. And if we just put these up, just remember there's been a number of workshops around Gen I, and if you've missed some of them, the recordings are all available on the Italy website. So there's what's working in Gen I in assessment. There was one in April and May. There's the assessment redesign for Gen I webinar, which is, so there's slides and recording for that. And Alternatives Gen I detection capability workshop. We ran about 16 of them, so we've only put the recording of one. So they're still all available. And I'll now hand over to Hol. I think
Thank you, Elsa.
The quiz.
Yep. So we have one polling question that we would like you to join before we go further into the policy framework and a sample case of AI cheating in assessment. So on the screen, you can see there's a QR code for you to scan to join. And when you finish scanning, and if you can see the message waiting for presenter, that means you are ready in, and I will press on. Otherwise, you can go to your browser and type ecopol.au, and then the code is integrity. Okay, so I will press on so that you can see the question. So in the participant list, we have 35 participants, and we have 17 people have already joined the poll. So I will give you a few more seconds to join in this poll before I close that. So far, we do not have anyone who feel very confident in handling the Gen AI misconduct cases. And mostly people feel somewhat confident. So we hope that after the presentation that we have today, you might have a bit more of a way forward in these cases. So thank you very much for joining the poll. So now I will hand over to Rod to present more about the policy framework.
Thanks, Fong. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give a brief update on where we're at with a couple of the major developments in our space, which obviously affects all the schools and faculties as well. So beginning of last year, there was introduction of the revised student disciplinary framework, which obviously is well and truly embedded now. But as part of that, there's ongoing review and analysis of the way it's affecting workflows, certain things that are coming up about certain types of misconduct cases and how they're handled. So it's one of those things with the framework now that it's been underway for for quite a period of time. We welcome any ongoing feedback that you can provide us, any sticking points, and any sort of additional support or guidance that you would like from the SCGR team. So with the long-term view, reporting and statistics is continuing to be generated to see how the framework has affected the balance of misconduct and where things land, at what level they land. The current challenges, as is the overall theme of today's session, is that the development of academic integrity is providing a bit of a challenge for everyone to get up to speed and to know. And as from our point of view, we're just taking a wait and see attitude to see how integrity officers are approaching cases, to see how the decisions come out, working with Italy and the development of guidelines. So I think it's one of those spaces where we're all sort of, getting along, watching each other, helping each other, just to get more knowledgeable about how to handle this relatively new phenomena. Currently, there's a review taking place involving falsified documents, and this often is medical certificates. There's been a little bit of back and forth and ambiguity about when things are handled in the schools as opposed to coming to a central board. What are the factors that determine that decision? What are the sort of the thresholds and that sort of thing? So at the moment, we've got quite a few cases going through Misconduct Board. At the end of probably July, we'll be convening a conference of all the current Misconduct Board chairs, President of Academic Board, probably the DVCA, and maybe a couple of other stakeholders to talk through the experience of decisions, the factors and the dynamics of this. And we'll be hoping to be able to provide more guidance out to schools, integrity officers about, especially medical certificates in the next few weeks, just to provide a bit of clarity around when things should stay in the school and when things should be referred to a central committee and the sort of penalties that might be recommended. So just, we understand the ambiguity around that, and we just stay tuned on that point. There will be further development of guides, in terms of investigation guides, the sort of principles that are coming through to us from legal involvement, things that are seen to be more promising, like what the requirements that we have to build into what we take into consideration. Also, questions that we get from Texer and things like that about how we're addressing certain of their concerns, like in terms of sexual misconduct, mental health and things like that. Just making sure that as the way we process misconduct cases. So we'll be hopefully developing more clear guidelines around that, about the things that we need to address as part of our overall process. Overall, we continue to encourage everyone to get involved with the community practice, whether it's within the school, across your faculties, discipline areas. This is a great way to share ideas, experiences, the sort of penalties that you're looking at, the sort of approaches to investigation. And we also encourage that across discipline areas, because sometimes the perceived inconsistency of outcomes may be related to the type of discipline or type of assessment that is being looked at within misconduct context. So if clusters of disciplines are discussing what is specific to them, that provides the grounds for the consistency within subsets of misconduct. I'll just go to the next slide. So, as you're probably aware, the other major development in our space was the introduction of the new complaints management system, which handles both grievance and misconduct right across the university, schools, faculties, and HR integrity unit and research integrity. Just with this, has come online in April, so we're very much in that stage where we're still reviewing the setup, the settings, the procedures. So there's a few questions underway with this at the moment. As you're probably aware, this yet to sort of define particular procedures and produce guidelines out to everyone as to how to handle it within the system. So once again, we welcome your feedback. It's one of those things where there's a lot of processes that may only be coming to light now as they're working their way through the system. So there may be sort of little gaps and things that have been missed in the setup that we're only going to address now because we're actually working through real cases. So we're working through the systems. As you can see on the slides, there's the top left is the front page where you lodge an incident. The slide on the right, in the systems training hub, there's a range of resources that you can access, guides, quick reference guides and steps. We will continue to add to that, but we encourage you to access that if you're using the system for the first time. Once again, get involved with the community of practice or just get in contact with us if you're wanting more specific advice about using Advocate. That's about it for me. I'll hand over to KK.
Can I just stop for a minute? Can I ask you, Rod, sorry, KK, can you just tell quickly everyone who are the sort of liaison officers you have?
Yeah, so within our team, there's 3 case coordinators. So there's Catherine, myself, and Janine, and also myself, where we sort of take care of dealing with a particular faculty or a set of schools, like usually within the faculty, to be your contact point. So if you've got policy or if you just want to touch base about something, we'll be a contact point. I'll distribute that list. Sorry, I don't have it on how many. I should have had that on the slide, but I'll send that out again soon, just so that everyone's aware of who your contact point is.
Thanks, Rod. Sorry, KK.
That's right. That's all right. Thank you. My name is KK Tang. I'm from the School of Economics. And today I'm going to talk about the AI cheating investigation process. This is just based on my personal experience in semester 1. I have done a similar presentation roughly about 2 months ago, so I apologize to those who have already heard the same presentation before, but there's some updated information in today's presentations. Next slide. So just give you some background. The courses I refer to are the Econ 1020 Introductory Macroeconomics and a postgraduate course, Econ 711 Foundation in Macroeconomics. Both courses are introductory courses, and both of them have 2 major assignments. One is called the country report, and the other one is called the impact report. Each of these reports accounts for 35% of the course, so it's a major assignment. Now, both assignments are individual assignments, so students have to complete by themselves. Late last year, as we all know now, when ChatGPT just came out, many course coordinators, rushed to check, whether their assessment design were vulnerable to AI cheating. Unfortunately, both report assessment were found to be vulnerable. It's very easy to use ChatGPT to produce a submission for both assessment. And as a result, I make some minor changes to the country report, and I make some major changes to the impact report. But today's focus is on the investigation related to the country report. Now, next slide, please. For the undergraduate course 1020, I had slightly over 400 submissions for the country report. Out of them, 5 submissions had a Turnitin Gen AI index of 40% or higher. And out of these 5, 3 of them had 100% AI index. And after looking through the actual submissions, 2 out of these 3 submissions require further clarification with the students. And for these 2 submissions, before the penalty, they were given 50 out of 100. So the mark was not particularly high. For the postgraduate course, we had 126 submissions. Out of them, 4 submissions had a AI index of 40% or higher, and 2 of them had a 100% AI index. And after the initial inspections, both submissions need further clarification from the students. Again, before any penalty, these 2 submissions had a mark of somewhere between 50 to 70%. So a little bit higher than the undergraduate course, but not substantially higher. Next one, thank you. So here I'm going to go through these 4 cases of 100% AI index and how we deal with it. For the first one, we could not find any of the references in the submissions that is available on the internet or on the publisher's website. So we contact the student asking them to provide us either a copy of the references or a link to those references. The student was not able to do so, not surprisingly, and after being pressed to provide explanation, eventually they admitted that they used the ChatGPT to complete the report. So the case was quite clear, so it was referred to the school's academic integrity officer, and the integrity officer decided to impose a 0-mark penalty, and the student accepted the penalty. The next one, please, thank you. This one a little bit different. This one has only 2 references to the data source, and both data sources are real, okay? But the submission did not include any references or citation to support its arguments. And when we asked the student why there was no citations, the student responded to our inquiry immediately by providing a missing Chinese reference and explained to us why this Chinese reference was not included in the original submissions. And after this discussion, we realized that we did not have enough evidence to refer the case to the integrity officer. However, the student was still penalized for not including the reference, the Chinese reference in their report. The next one, thank you. This one, again, we could not find only one of many references on the internet or on the publisher's website. The other references included in the submission are found to be real. Now, when we asked the student provided some links to the fabricated reference, but the link was either irrelevant or not working, okay? At the same time, the student also provides some additional references which are real. However, those references, although they have the same author name as the fabricated reference, they are completely irrelevant to the course or the assignment. So this case was eventually referred to the academic integrity officer, and the integrity officer also imposed a 0-mark penalty, and the student accepted the penalty. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned, we make some minor changes to the country report. The minor changes was the inclusion of a reflection sections. So in the reflection section, students were asked to answer 3 questions. First, which aspect of the country report did you find most difficult and why? Second, how did you overcome those difficulties? And third, what advice and suggestions can you give to your fellow students about completing the country report? Now, of course, students could still use the AI to write a reflective essay, but sometimes it did leave some, hints for us to follow up. Next slide, please. So in the 4th case, the students stay in the reflection section that they had used multiple sources of data and carry out an extensive literature review for their submissions. But their submission actually has cited only one source of data and no references to any study in the literature. Now, regarding how they overcome the difficulty, the students stay in the reflection section that they had consulted with the instructor, while in the reality, it didn't happen at all. Okay, when we contact the students asking for clarification, the student did not respond to our inquiry. Now, this case was referred to the integrity officer. However, we feel that, or the integrity officer feel that there was no sufficient evidence to impose a penalty straight away, and therefore the integrity officer required the student to do a supplementary oral assessment. For the oral assessment, the student needed to demonstrate 2 things. They fully understand the content of their written submissions and the related theories and concepts covered in the course. Secondly, they have to demonstrate the submission is their own work. Now, you can see here, the purpose of the oral assessment is to put the burden of proof back onto the students, okay? And in this case, it is very clear that, the student, because it's very likely they did not do the original submission work, so they did not even bother to attend the oral assessment, and eventually they still receive a 0 mark for their assignment. Next slide, please. Okay, so what have I learned in semester 1? The Turnitin AI index can only use it as a red flag, no matter how high it is. Okay, even though it's 100%, it can still be used as a red flag. It cannot be used as a pure evidence or only evidence. Sometimes it's not even necessarily helpful or even useful to mention AI or AI index when we communicate with the students for 2 reasons. First, if the student is innocent, it could cause the student a lot of stress. Now, if the student is not innocent, by mentioning about AI, it may give them some clue about how to respond to our inquiry, okay? Now, in this process, the course coordinator needed to identify which part of the assignment is suspicious, and therefore to ask students for clarifications. If the student does not provide a satisfactory response, then the course coordinator can discuss with the integrity officer whether there is sufficient evidence besides the AI index score to proceed as a case of academic misconduct. If there is insufficient evidence to suggest academic misconduct or to pursue as a case of alleged academic misconduct, the course coordinator can still consider whether the marking guideline offer some avenue to impose penalties that is appropriate, depending on what happened. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. Yeah. So that's some final remarks. Personally, I feel that to investigate AI cheating is actually quite similar to investigating contract cheating rather than plagiarism, except that no money is involved. Okay, and because the similarity of AI cheating and contract cheating, things that can help to reduce contract cheatings probably will be very useful to reduce AI cheating as well, such as we can have a mandatory additional oral assessment for students with suspicious submissions. And also because we know, at least for the current generation of the ChatGPT or other similar AI, what they can do and what they cannot do, so we can design our assessment targeting those weaknesses. For example, we can make it compulsory for students to including specific type of graph or even hand-draw diagram as part of their submission. Or we can make it compulsory for them to submit data file, okay, or other submitting document as part of the assessment submissions. That can help to reduce the chance they're using AI for cheating. Thank you. So I believe this is pretty much the all the major presentation for today. So I think the next will be we open up the section for Q&A. So if anyone who would like to ask any question of any presenter, please feel free to turn on your microphone or put it into the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, KK. I've seen a few comments about your presentation, which is very useful with your real case example. So thank you very much for your sharing. So now I will stop sharing the sign and we can have any question here or any observations that you would like to share.
Someone asked me a question, what are the additional oral assessment as a part of the penalty from an accepted conduct notice? In our case, I can't remember whether the academic integrity officer actually issued a conduct notice or not, but that is part of the penalty. So the oral assessment is part of the, you can call it penalty, imposed by the integrity officer. Do you include the possibility of an oral assessment confirm student understanding of assessment in the course profile? In this case, we did not specify in the course profile of the oral. That is the decision set by the integrity officer. My understanding, actually, I only heard indirectly heard a case that some student may contest that. And so in the future, if I probably will actually include into the oral, the possible of oral assessment as in the course profile. So to make it, very clear, the student's obligation, if there is, part of their submission is suspicious, or we are not satisfied with the quality of their submission, then we have the right to ask them to attend the oral submission. So putting down into the course profile will be much more transparent and avoid the situation of the student contesting the decisions. That will be my preference.
Okay, Peter was asking how time consuming was your course coordinator investigation?
How time consuming? I think because this is the first semester, we have to deal with the AI related cheating, and so a lot of time I spend with the integrity officer to work out what we consider to be sufficient evidence to go forward to be dealt with by the integrity officer, and what cases we consider, what kind of evidence we consider to be probably not sufficient to go to that stage. And so a lot of time actually is not really spent on dealing with individual case, but getting a consensus between me and the integrity officer. And once that consensus actually has been developed, things become a little bit easier. Now, however, the integrity officer still needed to communicate with different course coordinator, and that, my understanding is quite time consuming. And because this different course coordinator may have different expectation of what considered to be sufficient evidence and what considered to be insufficient evidence. So it's not an easy easy thing to deal with, because I think we still do not have a a clear consensus amongst our colleagues of how to deal with it.
Yeah, thank you. There's another question there about the translation software used by students and its implications for assessment and integrity. So is that the student who actually used the Chinese reference? Is that what, I'm assuming that's what that's about? Or is that just generally?
That's generally.
Thanks. So you're thinking about in language. Someone else might like to answer that question. I don't know if that's in, I don't know if many students in economics use that.
Okay.
You want to answer?
I can say a few things. I noticed actually that become very, very popular. And in fact, the students actually don't even bother to hide at all. Because nowadays the translation software is so common, and in fact most of the students, as far as I know, they have the translation software installed on the computer, so everything actually will be bilingual automatically. Now, whether that is considered to be have create any integrity issue is a bit tricky, because as long as the idea was their original, it's their own. Translating from one language to another language does not imply that they borrow someone else or they use someone else's ideas. Okay, at least in economics. But I guess in humanity, it's a bit different, right? Because how you I guess in terms of writing an essay or creative writing, obviously is very different from solving a mathematical problems. So maybe some other people can jump in. And
yeah, School of Languages, you've had a lot of experience with this one. Is anyone from there? While we're waiting, I'll just point out that the AI indicator is part of the Turnitin software that Peter showed that slide with a little, it gives a count out of 100%. So you will see that, but your students won't see that. So at the moment it's in preview mode, and we're really only using it, as to see how it goes, because it's not been proven enough yet to just say, like KK said, if you get 40% or whatever figure, that's enough for a case. When we're not using it that way, we're using it more as a red flag, just as KK said. And Elsa's put the link there to tell you more about that. Oh, Adriana, you can talk. Where's your mic?
Yes, sorry, I'm just in a big screen.
Oh, sorry.
So I can't share my screen, but I just wanted to say, yes, we're currently exploring how this is affecting some of the courses that we teach. As you know, we have courses that focus on English, and then other courses that obviously have to do with other languages. So it's definitely something that's been on our radar. And I know we have colleagues like Peter Crosswaite, who's been very proactive in this area. And definitely the example and the way that you're approaching these issues is very helpful for us too.
Thanks, Adriana. So Adriana is an academic in Spanish, aren't you, in School of Languages?
That's right, yes.
actually, just related to that, translation software is not the only software is kind of borderline on the AI. The other one is the editing software, because nowadays the editing software is far more sophisticated than just checking your grammar, fixing up the tense or that kind of thing. They do a lot of actually rewriting. The extension of the rewriting basically, it's up to your decision. So it's very hard to decide whether what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
As Fiona's pointed that out, they've said students have actually come back with saying that the translation software has given them 100% AI score. Yeah. Oh. You can, if you wanted to speak to us, which is you can.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just clarifying that I had a case where a student had a very, very high indicator percentage. And so when I sought clarification from the student, their response was that they had used a translation software. So I just wanted to find out from KK or anybody else whether there is a link between the indicator and the use of translation software.
I actually this is new to me, so I haven't actually spent much time on whether the translation software actually led to high AI indicator. This is a good point. I suppose, you know, that's kind of easily test.
We haven't done a translation, but we did put when we did the original testing, we did it with assignments from. We did some testing with assignments from a previous year when the ChatGPT wasn't available. And we also, so we put it through the indicator and saw what came up. And then we also grabbed those assignments and used a couple of different prompts to see what Gen I would do if we said, one, we just did a very simple prompt that said fix grammar. And one we did a more complicated prompt that said, you know, fix the spelling and grammar, but keep my voice, etc., etc. We found one student whose original work, and they had a 3, so they must have got a 3 based on their argument. It wasn't an issue with the writing. It did very little to their assignment, especially with the more detailed prompt that was saying, you know, keep my voice, etc. The student who got a 4 that we put through, it got, I think, from memory, when we gave it a very simple prompt, it came up with a score of 64%. When we gave it a more detailed prompt about keeping, you know, my voice and style, etc., it still came up with 63. When we looked at the changes, ChatGPT had made a lot of changes to that student's work, basically because the writing structure was so poor.
But then if it indicate 100%, recently the Turnitin have a workshop and talking about their detection capability. They say that for the software such as Grammarly, they do not take it as Gen AI. They take it. So that means that when the student use Grammarly to improve their writing, then the Gen AI will not conclude that this is written by Gen AI. So I think that for the cases that we have 100%, we need to read through the student paper and then to check if they have include anything like falsified data or anything weird that is not mentioned in the course that they have. So the terms that we use from Peter said, we use the marker instinct to see if they include anything weird in their writing so that it can be a flag to invest further in their paper.
Yeah, so really what you're saying there, Hong, is we're following a similar pattern, as KP said, to contract cheating. You know, if you remember, like with authorship tool, for example, if you've used that, there's different areas like referencing, style of writing, properties. I think there's a whole lot of other ones that came up within that tool. But even without that tool, there is ways you can tell it's too generic, it's not, you know, it's got mistakes in for my discipline or whatever. This is where we get this suite of indicators, I guess, that make the case. And I think, KK, that's where we're heading with this is, and I'd be interested to hear actually from your discussions with the integrity officer, what was the start of that list of things that, you know, even without the indicator tool. So one is references. We know that that's poor. But there's other things that we're starting to learn that will help us make that case. And I think that's where we're heading in integrity now with Gen AI. It'll come. We'll be knowing, you'll be able to list off, oh, when they used a translation tool, well, that's different really, isn't it, to picking up the Gen AI, but it's still a problem.
Yeah, I think the major difficulty is, let's say if no matter how suspicious it look like, if a student insists they do not use the AI to create, and then how do we actually prove it? It's very, very difficult, no matter, the style or whatever, right? And so I shouldn't say the only way, but, one way to deal with it is to have an oral assessment, essentially, asking them to clarify the content, not the style, if they don't have any references, you can penalize them for not having references, but whether that is itself actually sufficient, to lead to a conclusion of they are using AI to cheat is not as easy. In semester 2, I have a different case. I suspect the student use AI, even though I can't put it down black and white. But then again, because I say in the assessment, we put a lot of specific requirement that the AI couldn't do. You needed to have a human input to do it. And the student did not do any of those elements. So basically their submission only have the written text, probably generated by the AI, but anything require human input was not there. And because of that, the penalty was quite high because it accumulated, and eventually the student failed the assessment.
So it may be the case that the Gen AI indicator and the authorship properties and other data are basically just confirming your flags or the writer's instinct of what to follow up on. And, maybe the case is, don't go down the track of saying, well, the writing style doesn't match your other writing style, etc. Maybe the answer is, can you prove your learning through an oral assessment?
Yes, especially, once you have the translation software or editing software, it's become hard to tell, what kind of writing style is their own writing style.
Archie.
Hi there, everyone. Hi, KK. You probably don't remember me, but you taught me economics about 20 years ago in my undergrad. So nice to see you again. I've got two examples that I just want to share from the School of Computer Science or Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, as we are now, both to do with software. One is a recent case that I was looking at where we identified what looked like collusion between two students, but these students had been using the same generative AI tool to generate code. And so the code generated was near identical because they were using prompts derived from the task description. Now, the use of generative AI in that particular course was a second-year course. It was permitted with attribution, but neither of the students gave that attribution. So obviously, they admitted to using the same tool. They were even using the same account. They were using a paid-for GPT-4 account. But we were able to, through their admission of using that joint account, we were able to say, well, you didn't actually give the correct attribution for using the software as you were supposed to, even though you committed to use it. And so that was a violation as we saw it. But we only could get to that because they admitted to it. We had no other way of proving that. So that's going very much to KK's point right there. The other thing we're doing currently in a lot of our software-based courses is we're making an oral assessment explaining some element of the code that they've generated, a standard piece of the assessment task. So this is difficult to do, particularly as we're focusing on the first and second year courses, which tend to have very large numbers, so 500 to 1,500 students. So getting the staffing to do that sort of oral viva is something that we negotiate within the school, but it's something to assess whether or not the students really have genuinely generated the content in their assignments. So they're two things that are going on in EECS.
Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, I think the Viva, I mean, there's different ways you can do Vivas, and obviously it's resource intensive. Some can be adapted, but it does remind me of programmatic approach to assessment. So for example, Archie, if you're in a, you know, an early year where they really need to know how to do their own coding or whatever, there's touch points or milestone assessments that's probably worth actually doing that across the whole program. So you know that the students have actually got, because one of the things I've heard, say, Anisha say about students is that they've got to know the basics of coding themselves so that later, even if they outsource it, they can still manage critical problems, you know, or adaptation or whatever. So if that was something that was vital to your students' program, maybe we should be considering, like what you had just done, is to add some sort of Viva to ensure that right at that early stage. I think that's, I can see your reasoning for that.
Yeah, at the moment we're doing it on a course by course basis, but across programs, I think that's a very good point. Yeah. I'll take
Well, you can't do it for everything, can you? That's the thing. So yeah, resource. Yeah, no, that's great. Anyone else got a question or something they'd like to share? Like, I mean, it's interesting in this community to hear about some of the investigations and how you've actually managed, you know, say, for example, how do you manage course coordinators that come to you with a high score, and what do you say to them? Anyone had that happen to them? So I can see a comment in the chat that it might be time to go back to exams. I think that's a big debate. I think that's a reaction that we can have, but unfortunately exams aren't really uncheatable either. So what do you think about that? Should we go back to exams? Hey, Jessica.
Hello.
Come on, I know you've turned your camera on for a reason.
Hi, so I'm the manager of the Student Academic Support Unit for the School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences, and we had this happen in semester 1. So we had an OT course that was due to go ahead with an exam online, and there was a very quick pivot to take it offline and get it back on campus, which required a lot of very urgent approvals to do so, given it was well and truly beyond the assessment lockdown dates to change those types of items. But we essentially found that allied health services and AI, it's pretty easy to put a question in and get exact anatomy responses. So it's troublesome for us in allied health, and it did result in our online exam very quickly becoming an in-person exam that we could monitor, where students could not use AI.
Sounds fair enough.
Yeah, it was a very busy semester for us.
Yes, because that's the thing, isn't it? Like when it's factual knowledge, and I mean, your disciplines and others have to, you know, we'd like people to know the anatomy and all the drugs and all the things properly.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
that's probably justified to make sure it's, well, you know, the learning outcome is that they need to know that sort of knowledge. It's not necessarily yet application or something else. So
absolutely. And
yeah.
I think so we've had a few committee meetings with our head of school where we had student representatives, and they're, you know, certain students are very aware of that this is dangerous for their profession, because, you know, realistically there's a lot more that goes into being a physiotherapist than just having the answers. You know, there's a lot of clinical based problem solving and just so much more that goes into it than just understanding some answers. And obviously as a result of that, the assessments are designed to test those things, but you know, putting pressure on students for every single assessment to be a Viva or to be a prac is you're going to have burnout, and then you're going to have reduced people graduating from the sector. So, you know, there's a lot of thought going into it for our field, and the students that we've been speaking with are, you know, they're worried for that too, because they don't want to be graduating into a field of allied professionals that aren't as prepared and equipped to, you know, go on a rural placement where they have no access to internet and don't understand the ins and outs of the industry and what they're required to know to deliver that patient care. So yeah, it's definitely very big. I assume it'll be similar for medicine as well. And you know, it's not something we're scared of necessarily. Obviously, our ECPs still have, you know, the multiple options that, you know, whether an assessment can have AI used or not. So we're also trying to look at ways that you can implement it that's not going to have an impact on students' learning. But you know, that's a difficult space when we're all so fresh and new to it.
Yes. But I think that approach you're taking, you know, you really are because you're accredited too. You're used to looking across program and picking out those really important attributes, or like you say, critical thinking, judgment, and all that. I certainly wouldn't advocate having a really intense, you know, academic integrity process for everything. It's too much for everybody. It's not really necessary, because I think if you can target the ones that are the really high stakes ones, the ones that are most important, they're the ones that really count, you know, to the student knowing what they should know. I think it's a much more sustainable approach. And I think we are heading that way, because remember we had identity verified assessment, and you may still do that. Some of the faculties still do that. But there is a new paper that's been approved talking more about a process over a whole program, or, you know, a sequence of some kind, because I know they're not all programs, of being able to improve, to be able to be assured as best we can that the student is the author of those things, but not in every particular little case, you know, subject, exam or test or whatever it is. So.
And interestingly, so I've been on a misconduct counselling session with a student who, similarly to some of the other comments, had used a translation tool. So I don't think at that point we had the AI indicator in Turnitin. So it was just a really high Turnitin value, and that was what they had advised to us as well. But then on a completely separate note, outside of assessments, we actually just completed a recruitment for our team for a Q4 in our administration space, and I'm nearly certain I saw 2 selection criteria written by ChatGTP.
Probably.
Yeah, so the selection criteria really spoke to everything that I had asked for in the About You section, and almost provided examples about, you know, how they'd completed overseas registration before, but then their resume had no job that would align to those skills.
Oh, interesting case.
Yeah.
Well, clever work, I say.
Yeah.
Those
selection criteria are not easy to find the time for. So
no, but it's really good to hear from a professional staff member. We really value the work that you do in this space, and it's great to hear some of your experience.
Thank you. And thank you. This has been really helpful.
So I guess that brings us really to the point of what else would be helpful for you. Would it be helpful for us to have more, you know, a session of discussion of, you know, how we're addressing Gen AI or different things? You know, what sort of thing could we do to help you? We have this session planned for every Ready to Teach week, so it's twice a year, but you know, we're open to doing other things if we want to talk more about our, I guess, sharing our knowledge about what our practice is in Gen AI, or, you know, what sort of things do you think would help?
For me, first up, Christine, I think that I didn't realize how many resources were already available as a part of the investigation process. So as the professional staff member of the school, the integrity officer and I often sit together and discuss certain cases. And obviously when things like that came up this semester, we all felt a little bit in the dark for that. But knowing that there's so many resources available, you know, we get a lot of email updates, obviously, from Italy and everyone else at UQ. So sometimes you skim read and you don't necessarily know they're there. So now knowing that there's some concrete information there to help us investigate, I'll definitely be looking at those.
Okay, great. Yes, it's the trouble, isn't it? You get so much stuff. But there's been a lot of people at the university really working on that together. So we want to make sure that you get what you need as well. Anyone else? What would help you? Well, it's been great discussing with you all. Thanks for sharing. Huang, will I go back to you now to finish the session?
Yep.
So I think it looks like we're going to have the poll again to see.
Yep.
So don't forget, this is a new tool that you'll be able to use next year for your things if you want to.
Yep. And we have the same question as before. We do not expect that we can change your level of confidence yet, but we still like to know what you think about how confident are you in handling the case about Gen AI misconduct. So please join.
We've certainly had a good example. Thank you, KK. Oh, hey, 2 people are B. 4. Wow, moves quickly.
Yep. Obviously, we have more people feeling more confident after the session. So yeah, that's great. Yep. So thank you very much for joining the poll, and the resources with the recording will be available on Italy website over the next week. So thank you very much for joining us today.
So we'll send out, will we be sending out anything to participants? Maybe Rod, you can send out the names of we can put together an email with the names of the liaison investigative officers, and any other resources, maybe the links to things that we've talked about in the session. So we'll get that out to you probably next week, but we appreciate everybody coming, and please contact us if you need anything, either at Italy or in the misconduct section. Reach out. So thanks, everybody. Bye. Thanks, KK.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.